Looking at some interesting activity on the Bitcoin network. So it looks like we've got opcodes that heretofore we had not seen, something called op_cat. Figure we could talk about this a little bit because it seems like a soft fork maybe got activated on Bitcoin, which is pretty interesting in itself. Have you had a chance to look into this at all yet, Lucas?
I looked into it a little bit, but I was hoping that you would explain to me uh, what was actually behind the soft fork. The opcat is has to do with runes. Is it? Is does it have to do with runes?
Well, it's an operator. So this is purely talking about the type of programmability that is available in Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin has a bunch of functions essentially that are available when you write smart contracts inside of Bitcoin. And for anybody that says Bitcoin doesn't have any smart contract programming, they're not quite right. It's very limited type of smart contract programming, and it's based on a UTXO model, so it's really different. But in the world of Chia, very similar to the types of stuff we're used to doing, but hobbled, I would say, is the parlance that I would use to describe it, because you can't do a whole heck of a lot. And one thing that's been missing is the ability to make covenants, to be able to make um, certain types of Bitcoin transfers have restrictions on them, either restrictions on when they can be spent or that they can't be spent at all in certain types of situations. And so there's been some thought that this would lead to some significant confusion inside of Bitcoin. In the world of Chia, we haven't had any problem with this. We have covenants all day long. This is essentially how Chia asset tokens and NFTs work. Essentially, those are covenants. They're restrictions on how those coins can be spent, because you can't errantly revert them back to the base layer. And this is essentially what was missing from what we got in our initial implementation of how they did NFTs on Bitcoin, because you could errantly spend them. So soft forking Opcat and starting to have this be active is kind of a big deal. It's something that's been fought about in the Bitcoin community for quite some time now. We had a discussion about the great script restoration. Opcat is one of them. So, like, essentially, there have been people who have said that almost everything that's in the great script restoration is encompassed in Opcat, and Opcat's all that's really needed. So having this active, at all on Bitcoin mainnet is a pretty big deal from the perspective of it becoming a much more programmable type of cryptocurrency. So this is something we definitely need to keep an eye on. I haven't had a chance to look in super deeply about whether this soft fork activation is correct. So this is something we'll have to report on throughout the week. But it sure looks like there's a soft fork activity on Bitcoin, which means some number of you know hashing power out there is considering this to be valid.
So I also thought I saw that that this opcat condition was part of the original design, or perhaps it was part of the original vision of Bitcoin. Do you know? Do you know the story of its removal from the Bitcoin uh, platform, or was it just something that was envisioned as part of Bitcoin in the future?
It was active for a long time. So Bitcoin used to be much more programmable. It had a whole bunch of opcodes that were active right up until very, close into the mainnet launch of Bitcoin. And it was Satoshi himself, the original programmer of Bitcoin, that yanked those opcodes like at the last minute, because he was concerned about whether the network would survive with those types of programmability in there. So they ripped it out last minute, and they haven't been able to bring it back yet. On some of the other forks of Bitcoin, notably Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Satoshi's Vision, they've had a much more extensive ability to program those chains for a long time. They reactivated a lot of that stuff. So it was very last minute. It was seen by some as a little heavy-handed and in a reaction to something that probably wasn't needed. But yeah, that's the story behind it. Is it was ripped out at the last moment.
And how does a soft fork get pushed out on Bitcoin? Um, is it is it an upgrade by some Bitcoin devs? Does it have to be uh, does it have to be approved by a majority of the miners? Like, how does that happen?
Well, any type of forking is all based on the number of the number of consensus validators that have accepted it. So a hard fork is when you have a fundamental upgrade to the network, and that upgrade is not consistent with the rest of the software that's running it. So anybody that runs that new code is essentially incompatible with the existing network. That's a hard fork. So it would in the normal world of like software upgrades, you would call that something which is not backwards compatible. Because if you run this, then anybody who's running the old software can't talk to you correctly. So a soft fork is when you activate something that is backwards compatible, and the rest of the network can just ignore whatever it is that you're doing because what you're doing is not incompatible with the rest of what's happening. And so usually when you soft fork in an operator, somebody who's running the old software can just validly ignore what's happening, and that it won't cause any issue. So that's what a soft fork commonly means. And so it means that there is some mechanism by which they've made this backwards compatible, that there's some software out there that's running it, and enough uh, hashing power has been devoted to this particular thing that um, that it's made it into mainnet in a block.
Gotcha. Have you continued to keep an eye, by the way, on BitAxe? Did you see their sort of standalone solar BitAxe miner?
I saw that. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. Um, well, any more information on Bitcoin that is pertinent for a Monday, or should we talk of other things?
Well, I thought just to drive this part home about like what I said, so essentially it's just reiterating that same concept. It's a backwards compatible change to the blockchain protocol. So, we would like to bring up the definitions and show off some Wikipedia stuff. Now, I don't know if you've seen it, but like apparently there's been some shenanigans related to Wikipedia. I don't know how standard pattern this is, but like stuff being scrubbed off of there and things being adjusted to support certain types of narratives. Have you been keeping abreast of that at all? Is that par for the course? Is that just normal in anything that's community editable and then eventually it reverts back to truth, or is this
Well,
something that's
absolutely. I mean, I've certainly seen, and in every political election cycle, and any time that you dig into the weeds of a hot topic, there are going to be people who are using the emergent nature of Wikipedia to spread the information that they wish to propagate. We've seen it with Tim Walz, we've seen it with J.D. Vance, Kamala Harris, Donald Trump. I mean, Bill Clinton. I just saw cancel Coco, wringing his hands and twisting his long luscious locks over the Jeffrey Epstein section of Bill Clinton's entry being removed. But what they all conveniently forget is that they can go onto Wikipedia and edit those entries themselves. I mean, this talk about, I don't know, the Orwellian terms like memory holing, etc. Yes, it goes on, but Wikipedia is not controlled by the government. It's controlled by the users, and so that's a very different. To put those to I don't know, when I see people like grinding an axe with Jimmy Wales or Wikipedia, and also invoking Orwellian terms like memory holding and double speak, etc. I don't give them a lot of credence. I think that is absolutely that is pandering to it's a creation of I don't know. They're making a scene. They're causing a scene because they can go and edit those Wikipedia pages. Also, the edits on a Wikipedia page are stored. So, what's the big deal? If you don't like something on Wikipedia, if you know better, then post it up. And sometimes Wikipedia does lock a page, and for instance, when somebody dies, when or somebody dies in sort of a public or controversial way, or whenever there is a lot of tug of war back and forth over a specific page, they can lock a page. But um, it would seem to me that Wikipedia is one of the best answers for the amalgamation of knowledge that we have, and I'm a huge fan of them.
I'm a huge fan of Wikipedia. I just was curious since I know you've edited some pages. I don't know if there's like some way that Wikipedia editors discuss things or watch for this kind of stuff, or if it's like immediately after certain types of news events occur that certain pages go on immediate watch or something like that. I'm always curious about how the back end politics of these things work, or is it just completely decentralized and people just go in and do whatever they want?
No, there's definitely there are discussion pages amongst the editors, and you can also accrue credits due to the number of pages that you've edited. Um, there's a ranking. Did you ever engage in Project Gutenberg, distributed proofreading?
No, I never got into it.
No. Oh well. I'm not sure what happened. I think Project Gutenberg got merged into archive.org or the Wayback Machine. But no, it's incredibly sophisticated. Wikipedia has a very small. I've also seen some uh, complaints lodged against Wikipedia for the operating costs of Wikipedia and the salaries of some of the workers there, but I think it's all hodgepodge. To me, Wikipedia is the best or is the highest example of a great use case for the internet that there is. Like, I would love to see the hosting of it distributed, but if you have a problem with Wikipedia, log on and engage in the content creation on Wikipedia. Don't just get on Twitter and make a video and blame the government, because the government doesn't control Wikipedia.
But then you wouldn't get to engagement farm. Hey, just to like bring this one back on the BitAxe side, I think maybe this is something that you had seen or that you were thinking about was
Yes, that's what I saw. I guess so it's just a new CAD design. It's not the actual product, but that to me is the idea that is a high level goal paradigm for consensus security for a blockchain. Look at it. It gets the energy from the sun. That's the most sophisticated lottery ticket I've ever seen. Put it that way.
it's pretty cool to see Bitcoin just continuously working on decentralization in a very grassroots way. This is amazing, honestly. And the fact that one of those BitAxe lottery tickets actually paid out recently is pretty amazing. So, yes, I think buying a lottery ticket like this is way better than buying a normal lottery ticket, because I'm pretty sure that you can pool these things if you want to. I know it's being touted as a solo miner, but like when I asked these guys, they said that there's an ability to pool it. God, I gotta just get one of these things one of these days so I can play around with it a little bit and report back.
You know, speaking of the just lottery tickets and consensus security in general, you know, this morning I was browsing my Twitter feed, which on another note, that the customized Twitter feed has taken a turn for the worse, and I hope that it gets improved. But
Did you go through and set all your settings?
now Grant, don't you Wikipedia my Twitter. No, I have not. In response, I have not. But you'd think that it would at least put content from the accounts that I follow, and not a bunch of content from God knows what accounts that I've never heard of, and also promulgate or ideas that drive me a little bit crazy. Anyway, we'll talk about that in a little bit, because I want to talk about Venezuela here after a while. I lost. So I saw some posts from Chia community members today about there was some YouTuber that asked, is Chia dead? And no, the answer is no. But I saw, you know, a couple of large farmers talk about that they turned off their basement full of hard drives, et cetera, et cetera. But
Well, we're below the capitulation price. Yes.
yeah, the capitulation price.
Nice.
What is that? What is Chia today, by the way? Have you seen?
We're hovering at 15, I think is
15. Okay. So I don't know. Let's not talk about too much about that. But just going to the narrative of consensus security of block rewards, I think it's so much stronger to think of it in terms of a lottery as rather than some like a wage or a salary. And part of the understanding that you get from people who engage in it is as if the block reward is some sure thing. And
it's always struck me as kind of weird that it's not just completely proportionate from the get-go, right? I mean, if you think about it, if you have the desire to have a pool almost from day one, right? Like nobody really wants a lottery ticket. Like they don't want to do something and never get any hope of return. Like that's just not the way people think about it. They think, well, I want a proportionate amount of reward based on the amount of work that I did. It's a fair thing. Why not just build the pool into the blockchain protocol from day one?
well, I see. I totally disagree. I think that people actually want the lottery. Like people
Then
are,
why is overwhelmingly almost every single consensus producing piece of hardware in a pool? I mean, if you disagree with it, it's just count the numbers, right? I mean, like there are so few solo operations that actually exist. I mean, in Chia
oh,
maybe it's a little bit different, but like in a lot of other places, it's like pooling is the only way to make it make sense.
well, I think it's because both the operating costs are heretofore like too high for some of them, or for some chains like Bitcoin. I think the solo miner is going to change that dramatically. You know, if I had a BitAxe solar miner like we're looking at on the screen, I would never go for the pool. I would take the chance on the big reward. And I think a lot of it has been both marketing and the design of the blockchains, and it's a false understanding of the human psyche. Like again, going back to this notion of a wage or a salary or some sort of like deserved distributed input. People are more likely, I would say, to play a game for a large reward and and a lower chance of getting that reward. But it gamifies it more. And think about a correlation between tipping and an actual salary or wage. Like a tip in some way is a time lottery, and it makes absolutely zero sense. Um, and I'm thinking too about this whole narrative that we're seeing gain speed from first the Republicans, God bless Ron Paul and Thomas Massey, and Trump picked up this notion of not taxing tips. What a great campaign line to that we're not going to tax tips, but and what a way to avoid a deeper question of income tax or I don't know, economic fairness on a broader field. But now the Harris campaign has also picked up this line of not taxing tips, and I think that tipping is a fascinating concept in payment. Uber back in Uber during the COVID lockdowns had not allowed tipping on their platform, and the chief economist for Uber really wanted to do so, and had been leaning on opening up tipping for drivers, and because he wanted the drivers for Uber to be paid more, and he thought it would be a great way um, to open up another like avenue of monetization for them. And there were others on the board of Uber who disagreed, and they said it's not going to work like you think it will. And perhaps they had experience in the service industry from before they were big tech gurus or bright minds on a board. But long story short, they did end up opening up. They did end up opening up tipping for the drivers, and what they found was that uh, the the Uber drivers, whenever there was a possibility for them to earn a tip, it ended up going out and driving when there was nobody looking for a ride. And so, when Uber was in control of raising rates or telling drivers that we have an outsized demand right now and the rate is up higher, when they just opened up tipping, they found that the drivers would go out and drive around all the time. And The Economist had and I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I wish I could, but he said he then changed his understanding of tipping and saw it as a tax on time, or a tax on expectation and hope. So I thought that was a profound uh, real world experiment with how tips actually work, and not only that, but how the human mind works and how our optimism works.
Say that again. The tax on the expectation of time.
No, a tax on human expectation, or a tax on hope.
Tax on hope.
Because if you tell somebody like there's nobody is showing up at the restaurant from 2 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, but we're open for tips, you'll have seven servers throw up, um, as opposed to like we have um, a set wage for the 2 hours around noon, or from 12 to 2. And
Oh, I see. So it's more like you'll have people show up because they think that they might get a bigger reward rather than a fixed amount reward, and that's how you're tying it back to, well, how should we reward blockchain production?
Absolutely. So yeah, so if and look at too at how lotteries work. Everyone says, "Oh my gosh, lottery is just a tax on stupid people done by the government." But states that have lotteries love their lotteries, and people will tell you, like I don't. It's they'll go out and buy 10 lottery tickets for $1 each, and you say, "Well, you wasted $10," and they say, "I know, but it's fun." And I might make $365 billion.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's certainly been an effective way, but it seems like a lot of people in the, I don't know if it's the pragmatic world of actually trying to run a business, they say, I'll take the fixed payout any day. So maybe this is a diversion, and maybe it's the dividing line between smart money and dumb money. If the lottery really is on a tax on people who can't do math, then solo miners is a tax on people who don't understand that these things are not going to pay out. The only way to get a nominal return on whatever you paid for this thing is to pool it, because you're going to run this thing for all eternity and it's never going to win is the mathematical outcome of thinking
No,
about this.
I think there's more to that, and I hesitate to use like smart money and dumb money, because I think that there is one, you can have a different business model when you have a billion people participating in something as opposed to 10,000 or 15,000 people participating in something. And not only that, but there are notions of, like if the operating cost is also or the entry cost into that participation is also a lot lower, one hard drive, two hard drives, and $5 or $6 added to your electricity bill every month. That's a lot different than spending $20,000 on a machine, and then $5,000 or $6,000 or whatever that whatever amount of monthly expenditure that you have on it. So to me, you just open up a lot of different possibilities as as we're looking at a broader understanding and adoption of crypto and participation in blockchains. I think that wise blockchains will be understanding and adjusting to like at best, like accommodate both ends of that spectrum, but at least at the least, like taking a chance on a greater adoption of consensus participation by moving over to this lotto concept or tipping concept of rewards. So that's all I have to say on that, though. And it's tipping with me is just one of the most interesting.
Along that line, though, Lucas, it is one of the interesting facts about Solana is that they do allow like a tipping to be put into the programming when you go to set the contract, or when you go to set the.
I would call that bribing, though, Rusty, and Solana, because well, that's a little bit different, because you're talking about the somebody who's asking for a transaction to be. And I mean, and it's a great point, but that they use that concept of tipping to get or bribing to get a transaction posted onto a block. But when it comes to an actual hosting of a Solana node, or that it's incredibly expensive to actually host a Solana node. And so, I don't know. I think Solana's. I think Solana would be. It would be outside of like the identity and design of Solana to be moving towards that reward for their consensus.
I was just bringing up a point that something like that is already kind of being taken into effect with the blockchain, with the Solana. And then I was also liking your point of when you were talking about the tipping as an expectation of service. I used to work a lot as a service worker. I worked in the Golden Corral for about 3 years as a waiter. And one of the things that I used to remember is it used to be really hard to get tips from certain people because they tip you on your expectation of your job and the job that you do. For some people, and then those people that they just tip no matter what automatically, and you get a count of which customers those are when they become repeat customers, and it's really interesting to see just how much attention the waiters and waitresses will put towards certain customers when they know that they're going to get a good tip from them.
Amen. Did you ever get $100 tip?
I don't know if, yeah, I've gotten multiple over $100 tips because when I was worked as a waiter, my dad was the manager for the Golden Corral that I worked at. He worked for the company for about 30 years, retired from the company, and so he was the manager of the company that I worked for, or the restaurant that I worked for, and so I kind of got privileged. I guess where you could say in my service sections of who I would be able to serve. And whenever there would be the Marine Corps would come in, they would have their 1 day a month where they would get all the pulleys together for the recruits. Once I became a recruit and joined the Marines, my dad started a tradition of allowing them to have their lunch or their event at the Golden Corral. And since I was a former Marine, I would always be allowed to serve those people when they came to the restaurant. And they would always, pull together the 50 or 60 people together. And, it would usually be a good $150 or $200 tip. And I remember there'd be some days on a Saturday or Sunday, just in the mornings, I could do a morning breakfast, make over $100 and leave by lunch.
Interesting, because I had an idea that if you I was going to ask, actually what what preferred customers look like, and it is large groups, isn't it? Like if you want to ensure that somebody tips, somebody who comes in and sits by themselves, probably like the lowest rate of expectancy for a tip. But as you get up above 6, 7 people, the number goes through the roof as to whether they're going to tip or not. But and great point on Solana too, Rusty. I think that we should be thinking about I don't know, optional rewards, or giving people an option to pay more, and at many like insertion points in the structures of these systems as possible. So, but maybe enough about tipping. What else do we have on the board today?
Was this the thing that you were thinking about? Because I know you mentioned it earlier about that there were some YouTubers who were talking about this and Chia capitulation. I thought maybe this was the thing that you were referencing.
There was actually another one. I saw that Monkey Zoo. God bless Monkey Zoo. He is a prophet of Chia. It was somebody that Monkey Zoo responded to, and otherwise it wasn't anyone that I heard of. And I kind of smirked and thought, who is this person who is lamenting Chia? But I hadn't heard of them. They were a YouTube. There was somebody with a platform on YouTube that I hadn't seen before.
Well, as far as capitulation goes, I think we're going to see it start to level to the amount of people who have the right configuration of being able to continuously run. Even if you look at this post of what this guy said, they invested a significant amount of money into the project, and this was something that Chia had said not to do from the beginning. I don't know that it's really valid to keep leveling that criticism at people. It's like, oh, you shouldn't have invested money. It's like, you can certainly put money into something, but there's always a point at which it becomes unprofitable to do it. And so if you if you see a rapid accumulation in the price of Chia, if it starts to significantly go up, you'd see people turning back to it and doing something with it. So I think this is just kind of par for the course. I personally wouldn't think too much about posts like this.
They erased it from the Wikipedia page, so it didn't actually happen.
Nice. All right, so should we move on to carry trade or Monroe Doctrine? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we put it in the headline, and I would like to, which I don't have anything specific to talk about, but we're seeing some broad things happen in the world right now, and I would like to try to bring some sort of sense to things that are happening right now. And the Monroe Doctrine goes all the way back to early years in the United States. What year was it? 1823. First articulated the doctrine on December the 2nd, 1823, and the doctrine was in response to France and Great Britain, especially Spain, and their colonization in the Americas. And it was the United States saying, "Hey, um, colonization is." They didn't necessarily say it was bad, but they say you should graze in your own yard, and this is our yard here in the Americas. But of course, then the United States, 100 years later, proceeded to forget all about the Monroe Doctrine and colonize the rest of the world. And we did so not by, different countries, imperially minded countries, especially from Western Europe, uh, behaved in different ways in their colonization. So you can see sort of the Dutch. On one end, you have say the Dutch model, which was to go in and not engage politically, not engage like in education or any sort of cultural immersion, and to just take resources. Like think of say like the Belgian Congo, think of Dejima in Japan, and New York City, like these notions of free cities that exist throughout the world, and having some sort of commercial hub that is totally autonomous from the regime. And then you have the French notion of just going in and taking over countries, and actually taking over the governments. And think like French colonies might be Vietnam, North Africa. We had Ayed in Tunisia recently, Algeria, etc. Other countries in Africa, and the French were also here in the United States, but Napoleon sold us all of the French interests. And then you have Great Britain, or England, the United Kingdom, and they would set up puppet governments, and so they, like they would find somebody who they could control that was had some sort of local claim to the leadership of whatever country that they were getting into, and they would support that, and they would give advice. They would give advice to them, and that was how they would operate. So the United States, we use military bases and the United States dollar. We created an international currency system, and then base that international currency system in the dollar, and control the price of resources and time in the countries that are on that system by the preferential rates that we give to different countries around the world. So it's interesting that we both like created this concept of the Monroe Doctrine in response to European colonial aggression, and then proceeded, once we had any amount of political power, to just join in the game. But what we're seeing, I would say, in I don't know, in not the twilight, but a waxing of American colonial empire, is countries that are looking to get off this dollar-denominated international exchange system that we've created. So, we saw a lot of red charts in Japan, and the narrative that you hear, that I've been hearing, I don't know what you've been hearing, but the narrative that I've been hearing as an explanation to the collapse of the Nikkei, the Nikkei, the Japanese, the Japanese index was
the stock market index.
Yeah, the stock market index was that that the carry trade had ceased to exist with the United States. And this notion of the carry trade was that people from all over the world, but investors were taking out debt in dollars and converting that to yen and investing it in in Japanese companies because the interest rates of the dollar and the yen were because the interest rates between the dollar and the yen were because there was a lower interest rate on the dollar than the yen. So you can go out and borrow debt in dollars and then convert that into yen and make some money and convert it back. So it seems that there may have been a depegging from that. But when I think about what does that mean, I've said earlier that I was worried that the United States was going to be pushed out of Taiwan and pushed out of some of our colonial interests throughout the world, because we see various countries of the world, all this narrative of BRICS and commodity swaps and alternative international trading systems emerging, and I think that the collapse of the carry trade business in Japan to be another step in that way. One thing that I also saw on the heels of that, and I tried to find the picture, but Korea, Japan, and China had a trilateral meeting, and I think that we're going to see, I don't know, more countries that are pushing out the United States. We're seeing a lot of saber rattling and aggression and fighting in the Middle East, and OPEC back in January changed the price of oil without even consulting the United States, and that had never occurred since the creation of OPEC. And the United States, going back to that Japanese carry trade, when OPEC was forming, and think back before Desert Storm, or maybe right on the heels of Desert Storm, the United States had told OPEC when it formed, you know what, fine, you get to set the price of oil, but you have to do it in dollars, and you have to invest those dollars that you make in it back into third world countries, second world countries, into IMF and World Bank, or into the World Bank, or into multinational corporations. And so when there are other options for international trade for OPEC, like they begin to stop the impetus for them to listen to the United States is lessened, and when simultaneously the United States is putting dollars out on the table, but then creating rules for those dollars, and by that I mean sanctions for Venezuela, sanctions for Cuba, sanctions for Russia, sanctions for Iran, sanctions for North Korea. The implication begins to be that, oh, if you continue to use this dollar on the table, if you don't do what we want, we're going to make sanctions for you.
Yeah, that's this idea that weaponizing the US dollar is going to significantly backfire against the US. I think we're seeing that play out for sure.
Absolutely. And it's been, one narrative that I hear in response to that claim is that, well, it'll take 20 years. But guess what? It's been 20 years. We've been sanctioning other countries, especially Russia, Venezuela, Cuba. I think we've been sanctioning Cuba since the 60s. But we've been heavily sanctioning Russia since 2008, 2009, maybe even before then. And various other countries, and even, I mean, let's not forget too that in the wake of 9/11, that we threatened to do so to the French, to all these countries across the world. I mean, part of this notion of the United States war on terror following the attacks of September 11th was that we had to chase down terrorism, and we were going to follow the money. And to follow the money, we told all the countries of the world, including Switzerland, which was one of the last holdouts, that we wanted to see who was holding money in their banks, and that that we needed to not only know our customers, but we needed to know their customers too. And for a while, and this was part of the emergence of the idea or the use case for Bitcoin or for cryptocurrency was because it became apparent that the United States control of international trade was very authoritarian. There were countries, there were small island nations that had ended up hosting, like servers, so that they could exercise their sovereign immunity to poo-poo or to ignore United States international regulations or United States rules about the use of the dollar. And we saw that for a couple of years. We saw banks in I don't know, small Pacific Island nations, but those were removed. Trying to think of the one that was off the coast of Australia that as their economy was based on international banking, it became replaced with Australian immigrants. It became an island of an immigrant detention island off the coast of Australia. But Switzerland, we even pressed
Tasmania. Are you thinking of, is that
not Tasmania? It's I think it starts with an N. I'll look at it really quick. But if you look back, I think it was about 2014 that we finally pressed the Swiss for to give up the vaunted Swiss secrecy, and they ended up doing so because otherwise they were not going to have access to international trade. So long story short, the various countries of the world have long been aware of the way that the United States was exerting control on the rest of the world and looking for a way to get off of it. And when we see the collapse of carrier trade in Japan, the Middle East not going to kiss the rings of the United States and asking us what we want the price of oil to be and setting that price themselves, and meanwhile setting up commodity swap agreements with China and Turkey and Russia, and not only that, but those countries forming an international banking system that they're calling the BRICS, and an international payment system to rival SWIFT. We should be aware that we should be reassessing the way that we're using the dollar to control the rest of the world. And I think sadly that we're not. I said this morning that I saw more of a narrative going about Venezuela. Why is Venezuela important? The United States seems very addicted to the narrative that it's cheap to run your air conditioning or to drive around in the United States. It's cheap to go fill up your car with gas, and that gives you some notion of liberty to go get in your car and drive somewhere and pay for a venti latte 20 miles from your home and then come back home. And so we, what Venezuela has the largest amount of oil reserves in the world. It is right at our doorstep from the Caribbean, from our southern coast, and the United States seems to be very interested in the recent election in Venezuela. We have denied the results of the Venezuelan election. We have claimed that Maduro is an illegitimate president, which I would say is none of our business. If we don't believe he's president, we should at least be backing away or going back to the original roots of America and saying, you know, if you don't like it there, you can come here. But that seems to be off the political table in the United States right now. But not only that, you know, we've recognized Juan Guaido as the true leader in Venezuela, despite what the election results of the last election were. We are now offering "quote unquote" amnesty to Nicolas Maduro. Oh, if you'll just give up the presidency there, you can come to the United States, and we won't charge you for anything, as if he's a United States citizen to begin with. And then today on my feed, I see a bunch of politicians now, or the narrative growing with regards to Denver and Venezuelan gangs, and oh, Venezuela, they can't handle their gangs. And so it might be expedient for the United States. I mean, you know, my takeaway from that is the ensuing logic is, well, we'll go take over your country because you can't seem to operate it yourself. Anyway, that's what I'm seeing kind of broadly myself with what I've been tracking, and we've also seen a ratcheting up of the conflict in the Middle East. We've sent several ships now to the Middle East. We've sent a nuclear sub. We've sent the Abraham Lincoln. I forget what the name of the nuclear sub is. Russia has a warship patrolling the waters 30 miles off of Alaska, has several warships down in Cuba. You know, I would say I'm a little bit worried, but I at some point when I see the United States concentration on Venezuela, I say, oh, are we giving up are we giving up our fight to control the countries of the Middle East and the Far East? And are we turning to control the countries in the Americas instead, and maybe Africa? So I've gone on a long rant. I didn't mean to, but that's what I'm seeing.
So, I mean, we heard a lot about what was happening with Iran as well, like giving timetables and whatnot. And there seemed to be a lot of focus starting to draw in there. Has any of this related to that? I mean, like, why did that all of a sudden tamp down? Do you have any thoughts in that direction?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Netanyahu came to the United States a couple of weeks ago to address Congress, which you know, how many other world leaders do we assemble the houses of Congress to go listen to? And rhetorical question, the answer is zero. But Bibi went to, or Benjamin Netanyahu went to address Congress, and Kamala Harris nor Joe Biden, and this was shortly after Kamala emerged as the apparent Democratic nominee. And neither of them went to hold or attend that session. And so I would say that gave alarm bells to Israel that there was a flagging United States support for the war that they're having in Gaza. And also on his way out the door, Netanyahu did visit Trump. And if you'll notice, when you listen to Trump, he goes on and on about Iran. He's opened up several of his speeches with Iran as a problem. We're going to hit Iran. J.D. Vance says this too. And look too at their attacks on Tim Walz and how they are attacking his military record. And I do understand he is probably a bit of a poser and guilty of inflating his military service record. But apart from that, I begin to really worry that when this is the lead attack of the Republicans against the Democrats going into this election, what that actually means. Because if their projection of strength is not resetting the United States economy and figuring out how we're going to operate as a country and make things and get along with the rest of the world in the wake of the collapse of the international financial system, then it seems to me that they're going back to the old exercise, the Teddy Roosevelt, speak softly and carry a big stick with Iran.
Well, I think this is why, Kennedy is one of the only, serious candidates here, is he's actually talking about ways that this might play out, policies that are important. That I don't think it's any surprise that Joe Rogan is saying that, Kennedy is the serious candidate.
I mean, he is a serious candidate, but it just blows my mind that the Politimatter or the Polymatter website, and he doesn't.
Polymarket.
Yeah, sorry, Polymarket. There seems to be no no greater groundswell on an understanding of of uh, of the importance or the difference that Kennedy offers with regards to Harris or Trump. And when I think about that too, because there's also this talk of the uniparty and the Republicans and Democrats. The only side that ever talks about the uniparty is the losing side. But then whenever they're the winning side, they don't talk about when the answer of fixing the economy is making the United States dollar cheap and free for the financial interests, that's just a mirage economy. When dollars are created and given to banks and investors for free to go out and take advantage of the rest of the countries of the world, that's not fixing it. And it worries me. We just had an FOMC meeting leading into this collapse of the yen, and all the traders and all the politicians were beating this drum of we need cheaper interest rates, we need cheaper interest rates, we need cheaper interest. Well, when the only thing the United States makes is cheap money, that doesn't actually behoove the blue collar sector of the United States. And if we're really going to get back to making things in the United States, then we've got to get off this notion of we're just going to make dollars and we're going to go out to the rest of the world and find some country that we've gained the political leadership of that country, or else they're unaware of what we're doing with the number of United States dollars, and get them to make things for us. And that I would say is the greatest part of the problem with the United States economy today. And the Harris or the Biden administration talks about all the jobs that they brought to America, but all the jobs that they brought to America are part-time jobs or service industry jobs. All these politicians in an election year talk about getting America back to work, and in the minds of Americans, that means like going and making something. But whenever we're creating trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars to send to the rest of the world, we're not going to make anything. Or the only thing we're going to make are more bankers and more traders. And so we need politicians who understand that. But going back to Iran and what's happening in Iran, because you asked, is there nothing changing? In the last couple of days, or after Netanyahu came to the United States to assure United States support for what Israel was engaging with their conflict with their neighbors, and this was as they were also beginning to bomb Iraq and Beirut and Yemen. That it was on the heels of that conflict sort of bleeding into their neighboring countries. Netanyahu came to the United States. He goes back after Harris and Biden skipped that congressional audience, and he goes back and Israel assassinates the political leader of Hamas in Iran. And when that happened, I thought, oh, this is an action that was calculated to, because violence in Iran should be a no-go because of the very tense history And that goes back to the United States coup against the Iranian leader back in the 50s. You know, some people seem to be oblivious to the reason that Iran doesn't like the United States isn't a religious region. It has to go back to them being very aware of what the United States was up to, because the CIA perpetrated a coup in Iran back in the 50s, and they got out from under it. I think in the 70s, but I don't remember that timeline. But that's the actual reason that Iran hates the United States, is because they have long seen what the United States was doing with regards to having coups. And when the people understand and support that, that's a very different story than a couple of elite politicians understanding that. So Israel assassinated a Hamas leader in Iran to further draw the United States into that conflict, and that certainly worked out in that way. And so while the United States is sending warships, etc., you know, you asked what is happening, and what is happening is the United States, I can guarantee you, I mean, Joe Biden even, I believe even, I don't know actually if he said, but I saw reports that he was yelling on the phone to Netanyahu. And he was angry and yelling on the phone, and I'm glad he was, because he should be pissed, and we should all be pissed that Israel is engaging in further and further aggression on the strength of the United States should worry us all. And not only has the Biden administration been calling more strongly for a ceasefire or an end to the Gaza-Israel war. We just saw the leaders of Germany, Britain, or the United Kingdom and France send a letter or make a proclamation that they needed to see a ceasefire immediately. And I don't know, I do hope that happens, and I think when I see the United States turning to Venezuela, that actually tells me that the United States is planning on giving up support and control of the Middle East region. And when they do so, we're going to also, that will be a tide change in the balance of power, both in that region and in the Far East. And so that means no Taiwan and probably no Japan. I thought we would be securing Japan as an ally and as like a last bastion, our long and old friendship of Japan, which after we dropped 2 nuclear bombs there, we kept it as a United States protectorate and territory for several years. And when I talk about creating dollars and sending them out to the rest of the world, and lying about the number we created, Japan was one of the first places that we used as an offshore location of building things, building cars, building computers, building Sony Walkmans. And South Korea was what we brought South Korea into that. That was sort of the payoff to South Korea following Japan. And those countries played the game for quite some time. Like even China, why does China make so many cheap things for us? Because they looked at what was happening in Japan and South Korea and said, oh, the United States is making these dollars and sending them to all these other countries in the world. We need to get off of the Mao Zedong communist system, but we don't necessarily want to become America. We don't want to become Japan or South Korea. So they willingly played the game for a while, but in doing so, we're trying to recreate the unsanctioned or American system of an international currency. And so that's what they've been up to since the 80s, since 1986. So that's what I'm seeing going on in the world right now. I hope that we soon see an end to the Israel-Gaza conflict. I hope that's what the answer is, because the other answer is that Iran attacks Israel and that we respond, and the escalation that comes out of that I think will be bad for the rest of the world.
I can't agree more. That's bad for the rest of the world if this escalates. So hopefully it can get de-escalated. But we're at the top of the hour, so really enjoyed the conversation today. See you tomorrow.
All right, till then.